Alright friends, so my name is Mani. This is my channel, Thus Spoke Mani. I remember when I was in when I was in college, I didn't have a lot of friends, and the books were my friends, so I would read a lot, and I would go to the library and pick out random books and to read. And one time I went and I picked out this book called Thus Spoke Zarathustra by Nietzsche. Unbeknownst to me, this is actually quite a famous book in the philosophical circles. And I started reading it. It was just so fascinating to me because I'm Persian, and Zarathustra, or Zarathustra, he was the prophet of the Zoroastrian religion. And I actually didn't know much about him when I lived in Iran. And this was really my first time really like reading about him or his supposed image or recreation, even though it was a German author. It was so fascinating to me that I, who was born and raised in Iran, knew so little about this guy, or I never even read a book with his name on it, and here I am reading about him by a German author from the 1800s. And that book set me on the path of learning and thinking about the world and how things are and reality. What's the structure of reality? What's the structure of thought? What's the structure of knowledge? And it really set off my life in an interesting path and where I am today. And I loved philosophy. Even though I was a biology major, I minored in philosophy in college. And I always knew that when I have something to share, I'm going to share it. And the name, my pen name, would be Thus Spoke Mani. Because in the book, Zarathustra goes to the mountain for 10 years. And after 10 years, he comes down and he shares his knowledge with the people. And so when he was 40, he goes to the mountain when he's 30, he comes down when he's 40. And I'm actually 40 this year. And I want to share what I've learned in this life from my experiences and from my reading. And I want to talk a little bit about Iran, which is where I'm from, where I was born, where I grew up till I was 15, and then we moved to America. And there's a lot going on there right now. It's in the news. People are justly and rightly so unhappy with the government. Okay? They are unhappy with the way that they're being treated. They're unhappy with their conditions of living. And I was just there. I got back 2-3 weeks ago, right before the uprising started. And the conditions of living are very hard. I mean, people are struggling. There's 40-50% inflation year over year. The currency is crumbling. The air pollution is so bad that you have to go outside. We have to go outside with the N95 mask. Okay? It's because of the sanctions, and then they can't do petrochemical refining of their oil to make gasoline, and so they do this other weird thing that's not really refining it, and the cars burn this junk, and then poor people. I mean, like my relatives are like coughing all the time. It's fucking terrible. That's just like a basic air quality. Like it's a basic human right to be able to breathe air. It's not much to ask that you can breathe an air that is not toxic to you, right? And it's not just in the big cities, it's everywhere, really. Like wherever there's cars, there is poor air quality. And there's a host of other issues and problems, and there's no political and civil freedom, and anyways, people are very unhappy. I mean, Iran's a rich country, it has a lot of resources. The resources are getting siphoned off to fight proxy wars, or they're lost in corruption, and people look at their neighbors, the Gulf countries, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, UAE. I mean, they're all doing well. They all have rich resources. They're well managed. And they look at themselves and, they see 50 years after a revolution that they had to fight life and death for to have freedom. Then they have no freedom. And they look back and they say, well, what did we do? Right? 50 years wasted. And so they're upset again. And there's uprisings in the street, and they want the government gone. And my dad was a revolutionary during the last revolution. And he fought against the government of Shah, and then later he fought against the Islamic Republic, and he was put in prison. So he was also a political prisoner. And when I was born, my dad was in prison as a political prisoner. So this gives me a lot of perspective on the political cycle of Iran and revolution and war. And it was interesting. Recently I became interested in learning more about my own history as an Iranian. And of course we were taught a lot of things about our old kings, the Achaemenid dynasty, the first one, Cyrus the Great, and then the other ones, and then the next great ones, Darius the Great or Darius the Great. And I was just reading to try to learn and try to learn more beyond what I already knew. And I learned some interesting stuff. I learned a lot of interesting stuff. So Cyrus the Great, he was told to us that he was a great and peaceful leader, just ruler, and he was, he is sold to Iranians in their own history as a very rightful king. I mean, to the point where you think he was the Buddha, okay? And no disrespect to him. I still have a lot of respect for him. I know he did great things, and he did many good things for his people, and he was probably a better king than most. But to think that you're gonna get an empire stretching from India to the Mediterranean by sitting under a tree and meditating and never shedding blood, I mean, that doesn't happen, okay? Let's be real. Conquest brings bloodshed. And he also was greedy. I mean, if he was content with whatever lands he had, he wouldn't need to have to go all the way to India and then Babylon and all these places, right? He wasn't doing this out of the goodness of his heart. I mean, he's a king, he's a conqueror. at the end of the day. Okay, he's not Genghis Khan. He didn't go and burn down every city he went to. But he's a conqueror, right? He wanted a big palace, and he wanted gold, and he wanted land, and he was, like I said, nicer than most of his subjects, but nicer to his subjects than most kings. But it's not like his hands were completely free of bloodshed or some tyranny, right? And so a lot of what we believe to be true from Cyrus comes to us from this thing called the Cyrus tablet. Okay, and this was found in Babylon. It's like a clay tablet, clay cylinder that they found, and on this cylinder Cyrus goes through this is how great he is, and he was appointed by the local god Marduk, the old Babylonian god, and Marduk anointed him and gave him the strength to free the Babylonians, and he came in peacefully and all this stuff. And if you look into it a little bit, like it's not entirely true. It's not like Babylonians just gave him the key to the city, even though he later came into Babylon and people put down their arms. There was actually a big battle outside of Babylon where many people were killed. And so Cyrus, wanted to portray himself in this way. So he wrote it in this clay tablet, and they put it at the base. They buried this tablet everywhere that they built buildings, like temples and palaces and all this stuff. And he did this throughout the whole empire, wherever he went, in their own language, with their own local god's name. He would write this, that Cyrus is a just ruler. He was appointed by the local god, whoever it was, blah blah blah. So this is probably the oldest form of recorded propaganda in history. It was essentially propaganda, okay? And he was a very good, he had very good public relations, and he was a very keen politician to know that he had to win favor with the local people. And so after he dies, he has two sons, Cambyses or Cambys and Bardia, and he anoints the oldest one, Cambyses, as the next heir. And Cambyses goes off to Egypt. He conquers Egypt, and so he expands the empire even further. And then there's the story. At least this is what we were told in the history book, that he returns from Egypt. He dies from a self-inflicted wound with a knife. How that's possible? A king accidentally stabbing himself with a knife. And then his brother was apparently killed by a priest who happened to also look exactly like him. He took his spot and nobody knew, but this group of elders, group of seven, mainly a guy named Darius, discovers this, kills the priest, and he becomes king. Supposedly he's Cyrus's cousin. Or at least this is the story that we're told. And where is this story told? Darius, when he becomes king, he writes this inscription in a mountain in 3 different languages. He writes this whole story that I am Darius, I am the rightful king, I'm appointed by God, Zarathustra, Ahura Mazda, which is the Zoroastrian religion god. And this is what happened. There was this priest called Gautama who killed Bardia, and nobody knew. I figured it out. We killed him, and so blah blah blah. And I'm Cyrus's cousin. And if you do a little bit of his research, I mean, this is out there in historical records. It's not that hard to find. Actually, it's not true. None of this is true. He's not Cyrus's cousin. Maybe they shared like a great-great-grandpa somewhere, because, you know, back in the day, you know, the tribes were close, right? But he's not his cousin. And the whole story about this priest Gautama killing Bardia and replacing him as his doppelganger is not true. Okay, you can look into it. Go read up on it. So basically, these 7 guys killed Cyrus's true heir and usurped the throne. And again, propaganda. They put this up in the mountain. And so even today in our history books, we're told this, right? Because probably don't want to give us the uncomfortable fact that, yeah, this is bullshit. This guy really usurped the throne. You know, this whole lineage was fucked up. This whole dynasty. And when I read up on this, one of the most fucked up parts is this. So Cyrus has a daughter called Atusa. And when Cambyses becomes king, he takes his own sister as a wife. Okay, because he doesn't want anybody else marrying her and bearing children who could be direct descendants of him. When Cambyses dies from his self-inflicted wound, and Bardia takes over the throne, then he marries his own sister again. Okay? Because he doesn't want anybody else going and having direct descendants of Cyrus. And then when Darius kills Bardia, he marries Atusa again. Because he doesn't want anybody else to have Cyrus's direct descendants. So propaganda, you know, propaganda is a powerful tool used since the beginning of time. And it just takes different form and different shape. And I was thinking about this the other day. You know, Khomeini, Ayatollah Khomeini, the previous leader of Iran, who supposedly led the revolution, blah, blah, blah. He was in France right before the revolution ended, and then he flew back to Iran. So I thought, oh, curious, why is he in France? Right? Interesting. He's in a Western world power. And I looked into it, and he was actually exiled to Iraq many years before this, right? And the leader during the revolution of Iraq at that time was Saddam Hussein. And so towards the end of the revolution, he's kind of getting fed up with him because he's making a lot of noise. And he exiles him from Iraq. But he chooses Khomeini to go to France, right? He didn't go to like another Muslim country or like Middle Eastern country. He goes to an imperialist power, right? And I asked my mom and dad, who were involved, you know, in the revolution at that time, you know, was Khomeini like the leader of the revolution leading up to it, or, you know, what happened? And they were like, no, you know, it's curious to think about it. Like, nobody knew Khomeini when the revolution started, just like a year before Shah fell, because the revolution was going on for a couple of years or more. Then you start hearing out of nowhere every day on BBC Persian, Khomeini, 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 the leader of the revolution, blah, 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 blah. And so I put the 2 and 2 together. Okay, it's not hard to come to this conclusion. That Khomeini was actually a Western agent. Okay? The Western powers saw this cleric guy. And at that time, remember, this is during the height of the Cold War. So they're thinking to themselves that a religious guy is better than anybody is affiliated with the Soviets or communism. Because a religious person, communism and religion, they go against each other, okay? So they think if they appoint this guy, they're going to be able to manipulate him And this is going to be a sure way of not making sure communism doesn't go into Iran. And then they do everything in their power to prop this guy up and tell everybody that he's the leader of the revolution, right? Western media, propaganda, to shove him down our throats as the leader of the revolution. And at that time, also, Western powers were getting fed up with the Shah because he had nationalized the oil, which is what his prime minister, Mossadegh, had done in the 1950s. And the CIA, MI6 set up a coup d'etat to take him out of power and put the Shah in power. And he'd done what, there was a coup d'etat by CIA like 30 years ago for it to not happen. So he ended up nationalizing the oil anyways. And so the Western powers were fed up with this guy. And he was kind of getting a little bit grandiose and too powerful for their taste. So they're like, all right, it's time to replace this guy again. And then Khomeini comes, and of course it doesn't turn out the way the Western powers thought it was going to go. And now here we are again, you know, at another crossroads of revolution. And then all of a sudden, from nowhere, Reza Pahlavi, the son of the deposed monarch, who left Iran when he was like 8 or 9. This is a guy who has spent all of his life either in a palace or in Beverly Hills. He hasn't suffered a single day for the past 50 years the way people of Iran have been suffering in Iran. He hasn't spent a single day in Iranian prison as a political prisoner. And now he's propped up, he's sold to us as the leader of this revolution. Out of nowhere, every day, BBC Persian, Reza Pahlavi, Instagram algorithm, propping him up, YouTube, propping him up, you know. And so, I see the hands of Western powers in this again. Undoubtedly, there's a revolution brewing in Iran. Undoubtedly, people are unhappy. Undoubtedly, the mullahs and the ayatollahs will be gone. But let's learn from our mistake. Let's learn to think for ourselves. Let's learn to not give in to propaganda. Let's learn that when Western powers meddle in Iran, the outcome's never good. This Islamic Revolution was the result of meddling of Western powers. Khomeini was a fucking Western agent. So we're gonna fall for this crap again. The leader of this revolution are the Iranian people. The people who live in Iran right now. They're the ones who are putting their life at risk, going to the streets, getting shot, getting killed. Not some guy 5,000 miles away in Beverly Hills. That's not the leader. So stop falling for this bullshit CIA, Mossad fucking plot again to send the henchmen to Iran to control us. It's time to wake up, people. Think for yourself. It's time to rise up.